All right, my dear friends, my champions of health. Are you feeling that little dip in energy? That worry that maybe your best, most vibrant days are just a memory? So many seniors I chat with share this quiet fear, wondering how to keep that spark alive for true longevity. Well, today we're going to tackle a big, confusing topic head-on, one that trips up almost everyone when it comes to nutrition and your well-being: meat. And I promise by the end of our chat, you'll feel so much clearer and empowered. So, grab a comfy seat, maybe a nice cup of tea, and let's dive in. Oh, and if you're new here, do hit that subscribe button and the little bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing our global family grow. You know, it's funny, isn't it? For ages, we've been told this super simple story. Red meat is the villain on our plate, supposedly bad for our health. We've all heard the advice, cut back on the beef, almost like a mantra for healthy aging. It's a common belief that can really impact our daily choices, especially when we're focused on maintaining our quality of life. This idea has been drilled into us from so many directions, and it's easy to just accept it without a second thought. But, as we'll soon see, the real picture concerning your nutrition is a whole lot more nuanced and, frankly, more interesting than that. Then, on the flip side, we have the supposed hero: white meat, particularly chicken. Oh, chicken is fine. It's the good guy. That's the general consensus, isn't it? It's presented as the go-to for anyone trying to follow healthy habits. And let's not forget about fish. Fish is practically canonized in the world of healthy eating. Everyone says, eat more fish for optimal well-being. It's almost like these are the golden rules handed down for seniors aiming for longevity and an active mind. No questions asked. It feels like a straightforward path to better health, but is it really that black and white? And what about pork? Oh, that's a tricky one for many. Some clever marketing campaigns tried to paint it as the other white meat, which only added to the confusion. The truth is, my friends, pork is still classified as red meat. It just tends to get a bit paler when you cook it. So, many lovely people are left scratching their heads, not quite sure where pork fits into their goals for healthy aging and good nutrition. This uncertainty can make meal planning a bit of a puzzle when you're trying your best to maintain your independence and quality of life through smart food choices. The usual justification for these broad-stroke recommendations, avoid red meat, load up on chicken and fish, often circles back to concerns about saturated fat and cholesterol. We're told these components are the big culprits behind heart disease, and that by making these simple meat swaps, we're safeguarding our health. But what if I told you that much of what we've commonly accepted about this is, well, not quite the full story? It's vital for us seniors to get the real scoop so we can make informed decisions for our long-term well-being and happiness, not just follow outdated advice. Now, let's talk about the total amount of fat in these different meats. Just as a starting point, it's fascinating because the fat content can vary tremendously based on the cut you choose, more so than the actual type of animal. You could have a very lean piece of beef, like a fillet, that's only about 5 or 6% fat. Or you could pick a fattier cut. But remember, a lot of that fat renders out during cooking. For example, if you cook ground beef, you'll likely end up with no more than 15% fat left in the pan. This understanding is key for good nutrition. For pork, it tends to be a tad leaner, often averaging a bit over 10% fat once cooked, though again, the cut makes a huge difference for your healthy habits. And chicken? Well, that's another one with a wide range. A skinless chicken breast will be very lean, but if you're enjoying thighs with the skin or those yummy wings, the fat content goes up. If you roast a whole chicken and eat a mix of pieces, you're probably looking at just under 10% fat. So you see, it's not as simple as one type always being leaner than another when considering options for healthy aging. Then we come to fish, often praised for its healthy fats. The type of fish matters immensely here. For our comparison, let's consider salmon, which is frequently recommended, due to its beneficial fats and relatively low mercury content. Cooked salmon typically comes in around 13% total fat. So, when you look at the numbers side by side, beef up to 15%, pork and chicken around 10%, salmon at 13%, you realize the total fat isn't drastically different. The specific cut and how you prepare it are often bigger factors for your well-being. For truly enhancing your journey towards wellness and aging with vitality, understanding these nuances is crucial. I've actually compiled a wealth of such insights in my new ebook, Wellness and Aging: Valuable Tips for Seniors. You'll find practical advice on nutrition, exercise, and maintaining an active mind, all tailored for us. The link is right there in the first pinned comment if you'd like to explore it further for a better quality of life. Now, let's peel back another layer and look at the types of fat, because this is where it gets really interesting for our health and longevity. First up, monounsaturated fatty acids, or MUFAs. You've heard of these. They're the darlings of the fat world, the kind you find in olive oil and avocados, celebrated for their benefits. We often hear that meat is all about saturated fat, but guess what? Beef actually contains more MUFAs. Around 45% of the fat in beef is this good monounsaturated kind. That's a fantastic piece of information for seniors striving for healthy habits. Pork mirrors beef quite closely, also boasting about 45% of its fat as MUFAs. Chicken has a little less, around 35%, and salmon, our fish example, comes in at about 40% MUFAs. So, this heart-healthy oil, which many people associate primarily with plant sources like olive oil, is actually a significant component of animal fats too. This is wonderful news for our nutrition, showing that these foods can contribute positively to our well-being and quality of life. It's all about balance and understanding what you're truly eating. Gosh, isn't learning this stuff empowering? If you're finding this helpful, a little thumbs up would be lovely. Next, let's address the often maligned saturated fats. These are the fats we typically associate with meat, and they've had a bit of a bad rap. However, the speaker in our source material suggests that saturated fats aren't inherently bad, especially if they come from an animal that lived a healthy life. For instance, a cow will naturally have a certain amount of saturated fat. In beef, it's about 40% of the total fat. This composition is actually very close to how we humans store fat, which is quite an interesting parallel for our understanding of nutrition and health. In pork, you'll find about 35% of the fat is saturated, while in chicken, it's around 30%, and in our comparison salmon, it's about 20%. So yes, all these meats contain significant amounts of saturated fats. The key takeaway here isn't to fear them entirely, but to understand their context within a whole food, especially when considering their role in providing energy and supporting various bodily functions crucial for seniors aiming for healthy aging and sustained independence. It's about a balanced perspective. Then there's cholesterol, another component often blamed for heart troubles, particularly when discussing animal products and their impact on our health. The speaker points out some fascinating numbers here. For every 100 grams of meat, beef will give you about 80 milligrams of cholesterol. Pork is right there in the same ballpark, around 80 milligrams as well. And chicken, you guessed it, approximately the same, 80 milligrams. This consistency is quite revealing when we're trying to build healthy habits. Even salmon, which is often touted as a heart-healthy champion, contains cholesterol, albeit a little less, but still in a comparable range. So, when people raise concerns about cholesterol being a terrible thing, the speaker makes 2 points. First, that its inherent badness is debatable, and second, that you get roughly similar amounts regardless of which of these common meats you choose. This information is vital for seniors to understand, helping to demystify nutrition and support an active mind in making food choices for well-being and longevity. So, if we add up the monounsaturated fats, the good guys like in olive oil, and the saturated fats, we see they constitute a large portion of the total fat profile. For beef, it's about 85%, 45% MUFA, plus 40% SFA. For pork and chicken, it's a little less than that, and for fish like salmon, it's around 60%, 40% MUFA plus 20% SFA. This naturally leads to the question, what makes up the rest of the fat? What do these other meats, especially chicken and fish, have more of, if not MUFAs and SFAs? This is where things get even more crucial for our quality of life. The answer, my friends, lies in polyunsaturated fatty acids, or PUFAs. These make up the majority of the remaining fat content. Now, traditionally, we've heard that PUFAs are good for us, and they include essential fatty acids like omega-6 and omega-3, both of which our bodies absolutely need for optimal health. However, in our modern dietary landscape, with the way we cultivate food and especially how we produce vegetable oils, we tend to get an overwhelming amount of omega-6. This shift is important for seniors to grasp for their healthy aging. Because of this modern imbalance, while PUFAs from whole foods were traditionally seen as beneficial, today we really need to differentiate. Generally speaking, for our well-being, we should think of omega-3s as the good guys we need more of, and omega-6 as the ones we often get too much of, potentially leading to inflammation if the ratio is skewed. So, when we look at the total PUFA content in beef, it's relatively low, somewhere between 4.5% and 5.5% of the fat. There's very little variation here, which is an interesting point for our nutrition considerations. With pork, however, the PUFA content is higher, ranging from 10% to 20% of the fat. And with chicken, it can be even more significant, anywhere from 15% to 30%, meaning up to a third of the fat in chicken can be polyunsaturated. Salmon, as you might expect given its reputation for healthy fats, has a much higher PUFA content, typically between 40% and 50%. The critical question then becomes, are these PUFAs predominantly the beneficial omega-3s or the potentially inflammatory omega-6s? This balance is paramount for maintaining quality of life and fostering longevity. Now, here's the real kicker and a crucial point for healthy habits: the type of PUFA. In beef, especially grass-fed beef, these polyunsaturated fats have a good balance of omega-6 and omega-3. The ratio is considered very healthy, often around 2.1 to 4.1, omega-6 to omega-3. This is what we ideally want for our bodies to thrive and support an active mind. It's naturally anti-inflammatory and contributes positively to our overall health, which is exactly what we're aiming for as seniors. However, when we look at conventionally raised beef from CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations, where animals are fed grains in often stressful conditions, the story changes. While the total PUFA percentage might only increase by about 1%, the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 can skyrocket to anywhere from 10.1 to 20.1. This means the increase is almost entirely inflammatory omega-6, and the beneficial omega-3s become nearly non-existent. This distinction is vital for making choices that support true well-being and healthy aging. It really does pay to know where your food comes from, doesn't it? If you agree, let me know with a quick like. Let's consider pork. With pasture-raised pork, where the animals live more naturally, the PUFA content is around 10 to 12%, and the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio is better, though still around 10.1 in healthy pigs. So, even in the good pork, there's a leaning towards omega-6. But when we shift to CAFO pork, the total PUFA content can jump to 15 to 20%, and that ratio can worsen to 21 or even 30:1. This is significantly worse than even CAFO beef, with nearly all that extra PUFA being inflammatory omega-6. This really highlights how an animal's diet and living conditions profoundly affect its nutritional profile and, consequently, our health. And what about chicken? Pasture-raised chicken, if they're truly roaming and eating bugs and grass, will have a PUFA content of around 15–20%. The omega-6 to omega-3 ratio here is generally between 5.1 and 8.1. Not terrible, but again, more omega-6. But oh dear, CAFO chicken is a different beast altogether. Its PUFA content can be 25 to 30%, meaning up to a third of its fat is polyunsaturated. And the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, it often lands between 15.1 and 21. This means some CAFO chicken can actually compete with processed seed oils in terms of how much inflammatory omega-6 it delivers into our diets, which is a serious concern for seniors striving for quality of life and longevity. Now, for some good news amidst all this. Salmon. Wild-caught salmon is where things look dramatically different and much more aligned with our goals for excellent nutrition. About 35% to 45% of the fat in wild salmon is polyunsaturated. And here's the beautiful part. It's predominantly omega-3. In fact, cold water fatty fish like wild salmon, sardines, and mackerel are unique because they often have more omega-3s than omega-6s. For wild salmon, the ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 can be as favorable as 4:1. This is precisely the kind of fat we want for building healthy brains and cell membranes, crucial for an active mind and overall well-being. However, farmed salmon tells a slightly different story, though it's still a significant source of omega-3s. The total PUFA content in farmed salmon can be even higher, around 40–50%. But because their diet is controlled and often includes grains, the precious omega-3 content is diluted. Instead of that wonderful 4:1 omega-3 dominance, you might find a 1.1 or maybe a 2.1 ratio of omega-3 to omega-6. While still beneficial compared to CAFO land animals, it underscores how an animal's natural diet contributes to its superior nutritional profile for our health and healthy aging. Let's touch upon something else some folks worry about with red meat, TMAO, which stands for trimethylamine N-oxide. The way it works is that certain gut bacteria, especially if your gut balance is a bit off, can produce TMA, trimethylamine, from compounds like choline and carnitine found in animal products. Then our liver, as part of a natural process, oxidizes this TMA into TMAO. This process itself isn't inherently bad, but it has become a point of discussion regarding nutrition for seniors. The concern arises because higher levels of TMAO have been associated with heart and kidney disease in some studies. So, when researchers look at people who are already unwell, they sometimes find these higher TMAO levels. This has led to the conclusion that TMAO is a bad thing and that we should avoid the foods that can lead to its production: red meat, eggs, dairy, and even fish. But, as with many things related to health and longevity, this is a significant oversimplification, and context is everything for our well-being. The crucial point about TMAO is that it seems to be correlated with disease primarily in people who already have underlying issues like insulin resistance, metabolic problems, or dysbiosis, an imbalance in gut bacteria. It's a correlation, not necessarily a proven cause and effect relationship for everyone. We don't definitively know if TMAO causes these problems, or if it's simply found at higher levels in people who are already metabolically compromised. In fact, studies have shown that red meat consumption does not significantly increase TMAO in healthy individuals with good metabolic health and a balanced gut flora. This insight is important for maintaining quality of life without unnecessary dietary restrictions. Interestingly, and this is a fact that often gets overlooked, fish, which we all agree is generally super healthy and beneficial for heart health and reducing inflammation, can lead to the production of 10 to 50 times more TMAO precursors than other animal products. Yet, we don't tell people to avoid fish for their health. This suggests that TMAO levels might be more indicative of your gut health and overall metabolic state rather than being a direct consequence of eating specific healthy foods. So, for seniors focused on healthy habits, maintaining a healthy gut is likely more impactful than fearing TMAO from whole foods. So, based on all this fascinating information about fats, omegas, and even TMAO, the speaker in our source video offers a revised ranking, which might surprise you. Tied for the #1 spot as the best choices for your health and well-being are grass-fed beef and wild-caught salmon. Grass-fed beef gets top marks because if it's organic and naturally raised on pasture, it's a very clean food. It also contains something called conjugated linoleic acid, CLA, which is an anti-inflammatory compound, excellent for promoting longevity and healthy aging. Wild salmon shares that top spot because it's arguably the best source of those incredibly beneficial omega-3 fatty acids, EPA and DHA, which are stellar for brain health, keeping that active mind sharp, and reducing inflammation, all key for quality of life in our senior years. However, the speaker does add a note of caution. While wild salmon is lower in mercury than many other fish, you probably don't want it to be your only source of protein every single day, due to general concerns about toxins in our oceans. A few times a week is fantastic for your nutrition. Next up, tied for a very respectable third place, or second, depending on how you view ties, are pasture-raised chicken and pasture-raised pork. If chicken is raised correctly, allowed to roam outdoors, eating insects and grass, it too can be a clean food source, contributing positively to healthy habits. However, compared to grass-fed beef and wild salmon, its fat profile isn't quite as beneficial, containing a higher percentage of polyunsaturated fats that are more skewed towards omega-6, even when pasture-raised. Pasture-raised pork can have a slightly better PUFA ratio than pasture-raised chicken, around 10% total, but it can be more challenging to ascertain exactly how cleanly the pork was raised. Plus, some cultures have spiritual or religious reasons for avoiding pork. So, while it can be a good food if you find a reliable source, there are a few more question marks for some people. Still, a good option for those aiming for happiness and independence through varied nutrition. Now we move down the list. At number 5, we have farmed salmon. Following that, at number 6, is CAFO beef, then CAFO pork at number 7, and finally, at number 8, bringing up the rear, is CAFO chicken. There are common issues with all these mass-produced options. For instance, farmed salmon often involves artificial colorants to make the flesh pink, as their unnatural diet doesn't achieve this, and routine antibiotic use due to crowded conditions. These factors certainly don't align with our goals for optimal health and longevity. The conditions in any CAFO, concentrated animal feeding operation, for beef, pork, or chicken, are typically described as horrendous. This often necessitates the use of antibiotics, leads to much worse omega-6 to omega-3 ratios, and potentially involves hormones and cruelty. The environmental impact of these operations is also a significant concern. The reason farmed salmon is ranked slightly above the CAFO land animals is that it still provides a somewhat beneficial omega-3 profile, albeit less impressive than wild salmon. It's a stark reminder that how our food is raised profoundly impacts its contribution to our well-being and healthy aging. The biggest shocker for many in this ranking is where CAFO chicken lands, dead last among the whole meats. This is completely opposite to the popular perception that chicken is always the healthy choice. The speaker emphasizes that, due to its very high and unbalanced omega-6 content when factory farmed, CAFO chicken is far from a health food and not something you'd want to eat regularly if you're pursuing quality of life and longevity. It's a powerful testament to how marketing can shape our beliefs about nutrition, often steering us away from what truly supports our healthy habits. But the story doesn't end with just the type or animal or how it was raised. The absolute ugliest or worst kind of meat, according to the speaker, isn't about whether it's beef, pork, or chicken. It's about what we do to it after it's been raised, especially if it's already come from a problematic CAFO background. We're talking about ultra-processed meats, which are often transformed into something barely resembling the original food, laden with things that certainly don't promote health or an active mind for us seniors. These heavily processed meats often have a laundry list of added ingredients, artificial flavors, artificial colors, sugar, high fructose corn syrup, preservatives with unpronounceable names, modified food starch, soy protein isolate, binders, and fillers. Sometimes, there's very little actual meat left. Think about chicken nuggets, often made from the worst kind of CAFO. Chicken, they can contain less than 50% actual chicken. The rest, a cocktail of chemicals, wheat, soy, and then they're usually fried in omega-6 heavy oils. This is a far cry from the nutrition needed for well-being and independence. This same principle applies to many mass-produced, cheap, processed foods like fish sticks, Vienna sausages, Spam, canned corned beef, and standard deli cold cuts. Unless you specifically seek out high-quality versions made from grass-fed or naturally raised meats, with minimal natural additives, like celery powder for nitrites instead of synthetic ones, you're likely getting a product that's detrimental to your goals for healthy aging. The worst meat is CAFO meat that's been turned into a chemical experiment. It truly makes you think about what we're putting into our bodies for our long-term quality of life, doesn't it? So, my dear friends, as we've journeyed through this meaty discussion, it's become wonderfully clear that the type of animal is far less important than how it lived and what's been done to it since. Choosing naturally raised, minimally processed options is a cornerstone of healthy habits that contribute to longevity and genuine happiness. Isn't it empowering to know you can make such impactful choices for your own well-being? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What's one change you might consider after hearing all this? Do share in the comments, and if you haven't already, please subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next chat. And be sure to check out the video I've linked on screen. It's packed with more tips for your vibrant health.